Hi, my name is Dan Burnett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. I'm very pleased to welcome you today to our celebration of the 6th anniversary of Ethereum. We are holding this event in honor of all of those who have, in the Ethereum ecosystem, who have worked so hard to help make Ethereum the most stable and capable blockchain platform in the world. What a year it's been, right? This last year, from the growth of DeFi to NFTs to, well, okay, I'll leave all the rest of that for the other speakers that we have coming up. But what I'm personally most excited about is that over the past year, we've begun to see a realization of some of the original vision of Ethereum. And in honor of that, we have some special guests today who are eminently qualified to talk about that original vision, where we have gone in the past few years, and where we're likely to be going in the future. Now, I am not going to have the privilege of introducing these particular guests. That privilege will go to our membership growth specialist, James Harsh, who joined us a few months ago. In the short time that James has been here, he has really made an incredible impact on our membership within the EA, and in particular on how members can communicate with one another and learn about the benefits of the EA in helping you to grow your business. James is a great guy. If you have not met him, I suggest that you reach out to him on LinkedIn and chat with him, and he'll be happy to talk with you about Ethereum, because boy, he's just incredibly passionate about Ethereum and business use of Ethereum and how that works. So with that, I would like to hand things over to our Master of Ceremonies, James Harsh. Over to you, James.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for that great introduction, and I really appreciate your kind words. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and welcome again. My name is James Harsh, and as Dan mentioned, I am the growth specialist here at the EEA Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And it is my great honor and privilege to be your MC for today's celebration. And this is truly a global event, a global celebration, as today I'm in Mexico City, and we have speakers and you, the attendees, logging in from all parts of the world. So once again, welcome to the EEA's Ethereum 6th anniversary celebration event. We're going to have a lot of fun today, learning more about Ethereum's past, present, and amazingly bright future. You're in for a treat. As Dan mentioned, we've got some fascinating speakers lined up. So let's not delay, and let's get this party started. For our first round of speakers, I'd like to bring to the stage Karen Scarborough of BP and Eva Balin of the Graph Foundation. They're going to speak about the state of Ethereum and the Ethereum ecosystem. Karen, Eva, are you there?
Great. Thanks for having us. We're going to get up our presentation right quick. So excited to be here. We're just going to kick off the event with a bit of a discussion on the metrics around Ethereum and really identifying the growth that we've seen in the past, like you said. So we'll talk about a brief history of the protocol itself, an update on where we are by the numbers, and some data by the graph as well with Eva, and what to look for next. So as a protocol with Ethereum, I think it's equally important, as we've seen the evolutions around DeFi and all the applications, to actually look at the protocol itself and give some credit to the Ethereum core developer team and the Ethereum foundations for the evolutions in this category. Because from the time that Ethereum went live in 2015, beyond the major forks and announcements that you see in the news, there's also been a tremendous amount of evolution at the core protocol level for refining things from a transactional level for pricing to allowing methods for scaling that, unless we had put these core foundational principles in, we wouldn't be able to have the scaling solutions that we're looking at today. And also improvements to how the Ethereum virtual machine compiles the Solidity language And this, as many of us here know, led to things like being able to launch the beacon chain to start the movement to proof of stake. And more recently, as we've moved to layer 2 technologies and actually scaling more of what this can accomplish, that's led to hundreds of projects building on what we call layer 2 technologies. And even around other forms of scaling and privacy, there's been an evolution around languages that allow developers to start to build in this scenario as well. So as we mentioned, the movement to proof of stake has been happening over the past years realistically. And this, for those in the audience, is the movement away from proof of work as a consensus mechanism, which does take a significant amount of energy and resources to accomplish, to a way that actually enables us to do the same mechanism, a similar mechanism on the order of cutting out 99% of the energy inefficiencies in this. So from where we've seen the beginning of the year having on the order of 50,000 or so different individual validators participating in the Beacon Chain validation network, now we're at over 200,000 independent accounts validating on this network. That's locking up about 5% of the Ether in Ethereum right now. So we mentioned the growth in the ecosystem, and this graph here shows how many decentralized applications over the years have actually been built and deployed on Ethereum. And what's significant at this graph, if you look at the years, I would say 2-3 years ago, where there was a tremendous amount of skepticism and we were experiencing the lull after a hype that we saw in 2017-18, you can see that a lot of developers and teams continued to build during this time. And a lot of our most prominent applications that we hear of today in the news were actually teams building several years ago. And as we continue, you can see continuous growth in this category as well. So what this has really led to is a whole ecosystem of an environment and tool system out there, whether that's DeFi or non-fungible tokens. You can see that all these services are building on top of each other and integrating in an ecosystem that continues to develop. So there were some metrics that we talked about in April at an Enterprise Ethereum Alliance that I thought were worth revisiting. At the time, we looked at DeFi user growth, and the number at that time was 2.3 million individual Ethereum accounts participating in major DeFi applications. And since that April timeframe, that has grown to over 3 million at this point, and does continue on that growth trajectory, which is interesting to watch. From total locked value, which, going over that metric again, it's the value locked in smart contracts that are associated with DeFi applications. This number, as you can see, has fluctuated. The major changes are the inclusion of additional projects in this category. And from the April timeframe, there's also been a shift of locked value growing more significantly in lending than in exchanges. And part of what you can look at as some rationale around that is there's been capital efficiency improvements in exchanges that a lot of us are looking to see how this distribution continues to develop and evolve. Settlement, we talked last time that Ethereum settled 1.5 trillion in transactions in Q1. In Q2, they've increased to 2.5 trillion in transactions. The distribution between Ether and stablecoins is about 50-50. So this puts us on track, if those growth trends continue, to settling $8 trillion worth of transactions by the end of 2021, if those trends continue. Some additional metrics to look at that we didn't look at last time was the capital managed by what are called DAO, or decentralized organization treasuries. So this has grown to over $5 billion worth of capital within these companies that are mainly DeFi at this point, but it shows the decentralized nature of how much is being managed by communities within Ethereum. versus other forms of capital that typically come into new companies or new organizations. So the other metric we looked at back in April was transaction fees on DeFi applications. I have here the April 2021 metrics for the transaction fees that in the pink here are incurred on DeFi applications. In the graph in July of this year now, we do see that those have adjusted, and we'll go into a little bit of why those are a little bit less than they were in April 2021. So that certainly has to do with the volume of transactions happening on Ethereum and the demand for that. So you can see from this graph on the left that the transaction volume has come down a bit, but part of the consideration for how this needs to be viewed is if you look on the right, the scaling of scaling of applications rather is also occurring off the main network, either in layer 2 scaling technologies, bridges to other chains. So to really understand where the activity is moving and how it's fluctuating, it's worth it to take a look outside the immediate mainnet ecosystem and see what's being developed in alternative ways to what we're typically used to. So, but there's much more than transaction volume that Ava's going to talk about now with the graph.
Thanks, Karen. So for anyone who isn't aware, the graph is an indexing and querying layer for on-chain data. So if you're building an application or just looking for some on-chain metrics, the graph open APIs would be the best place to get that. And so we think of API queries, so queries to the subgraphs, as a great proxy for Ethereum usage. And the reason that is because a query fundamentally is just somebody visiting a website, similar to a Uniswap. And so by looking at the graph stats, you can kind of gauge the way that, usage and developer growth has been accelerating. And so over the last, year, we've seen that growth accelerate between 8 to 12%, new developers deploying APIs or using existing APIs. And similarly, we're seeing the actual development of the APIs grow 10 to 15%. And to us, this signifies that there's a lot more Ethereum development happening that's agnostic to any bull or bear market cycle. And if we look to the next slide, we can see actually a few of the top dApps that are using open APIs. So we strongly believe that the Ethereum ethos of decentralized and open source infrastructure is actually being maintained. And some examples of how DeFi apps like a Synthetics or a Uniswap are using subgraphs is for data like trade volume. So if you're on the Uniswap website and you see total trade volume for a specific asset, yield farming, looking at values like total value locked or APY, these are interesting stats. And as we get more complex and start building more complex applications, we'll also start seeing more complex requests for data. If we head to the next slide, we can see some of the trends that we're actually seeing in terms of those APIs being deployed. So we're seeing around 70% of the subgraphs, so APIs, are related to DeFi, while we're also seeing an increasing trend of NFTs. And what's really exciting is this is coming off of the hot NFT winter, but we're also seeing a lot more of that continuing even into the summer with a lot of generative art and even sort of NFT DeFi interplays. The other really interesting one to me is cross-chain. And so this implies a lot more cross-chain assets are coming onto Ethereum. Things like Bitcoin, Badger DAO, these kinds of integrations of interchain assets are starting to come online. If we go to the next slide, we can actually take a look deeper at query volume. So whereas the previous slide was the number of APIs that were built, this is the actual usage of those APIs. So you can see DeFi is definitely dominating usage with over 90%, but we are still seeing, growth in other areas like network analytics. So this is maybe, data on an L2 like a Matic or Polygon, and also DAOs. And we're starting to see a lot more useful DAOs. And so as Karen mentioned, DAO treasuries that are growing, but also implying that many users are actually now participating in those DAOs, not just the capital allocators. If we head to the next slide, we can even see what the initial activity has been from curation about these APIs. So the graph is a decentralized network where anybody can actually curate the type of data, that is prioritized by the network. And so this is a great visual of just the initial activity we're seeing where, something like an UMA, which is a derivatives platform, is seeing quite a bit of usage. They're making up a significant portion of query fees, but something like a live peer or Curve or a Reflex are actually seeing a lot more confidence. And so we're excited to see how this evolves within the Ethereum space as we see these dApps get more usage. And so one of the trends we're seeing is that open source development and usage of open source APIs is actually stirring greater innovation. This means that dApps can build on top of each other's protocols. So we're seeing a lot of inter-protocol play. We're also seeing a lot of dApps sharing APIs, whereas a team maybe building on the same Uniswap smart contracts would have to build their API or build a proprietary server. When you share those APIs, it actually reduces that redundant work and saves developer teams time. So we're actually accelerating the pace of development in our space. And the last thing we're seeing is a lot more front-end diversity. So I'm sure a lot of people heard about how Uniswap, was making some specific decisions for their UI. But the cool thing about Ethereum and open APIs is anybody can build on top of the open protocol. And so we're excited to see more front-end diversity. And if we head to the next slide, when we think about what are the emerging trends from the API query volume we're seeing, as I mentioned, NFTs and generative art are really up and coming. Useful DAOs, especially in DeFi, so better managing those treasuries, as well as the way that that funding is being allocated to specific teams, so specific grants, the quality and caliber of teams or initiatives. Analytics, and then lastly, layer 2 and multi-blockchain. Although we are, Ethereum centric, we do look to allow developers to build on any platform they choose. And so we're seeing a lot more adoption of Ethereum-based layer 2s or EVM-based chains, like a Phantom, Polygon, Celo, et cetera.
Great. Thanks, Ava. So we just wanted to leave a few more components for the participants here to pay attention to as to what to watch now. So scaling, we mentioned, whether that's through layer 2 applications or otherwise, is something that is having a lot of movement, as well as applications growing with different privacy preserving mechanisms. Blockchain state growth is something that continues to be addressed in different ways, as well as blockchain security, which in many ways has changed from concerns we had a few years ago to different concerns now around transaction ordering and things of that nature. Government regulations continue to develop all over the world. Stablecoin growth continues to grow. I believe we're over 100 billion at this point in stablecoins right now. And user experience and accessibility. There are some applications coming out with direct access to a layer 2 scalable technology directly from fiat to cryptocurrency conversion. And that is expected to accelerate. So it's all very exciting, and we look forward to hearing more at this session.
Wow, great stuff, Karen and Eva. Thank you so much. I know I've got a page and a half of notes in just your short time, so thank you very much. Great metrics, great info. Certainly check out Karen and Eva on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect with them. Next, we're going to have some case studies. I'd like to bring Kieran James Lubin of Block Apps, Paul Brody of EY. Paul, you're going to be second, so I think we're bringing up Kieran right now. So again, Kieran James Lubin of Block Apps, and you're going to be giving us some interesting and relevant case studies. So we're excited to hear what you have. Do we have
Thank
you
you.
there? All right, I see you there. So it's all yours. Take over.
Share my screen quickly here. All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to really try to stay to time. So I have about 10 slides, 1 minute each. Which leaves about time for one real case study. So hopefully Paul will have a good second one. Very quickly on us, we've been in the sort of enterprise blockchain sector really from the beginning. In fact, we helped sort of create the category, both launching blockchain as a service with Microsoft kind of late 2015, early 2016, and also helping to found the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, which we remain board member of. So what we mean by enterprise blockchain technology has sort of changed over the years. In the very early days, there was the idea that you would consume blockchain technology really just like other platform services, databases, ERPs, cloud, et cetera. It's definitely changed in the last few years. There's been a lot more focus even on the enterprise sort of no crypto, let's say, side on deploying larger industry networks that interconnect more parties, but are still sort of focused on specific needs of business, and less so on fully open systems, especially with cryptocurrency. John Whelan, who you may have heard from earlier, you'll hear from later, is fond of 3 Ps, privacy, permission, and performance. That's really what we aimed ourselves at in the early days of the company, and increasingly have moved up the application stack. So providing solutions for specific industries, like Trace Harvest, which was developed in partnership with Bayer Crop Science, one of our big customers, which I'll end up talking about today. So thinking about just sort of a backdrop, like why should businesses, big businesses, small businesses be interested in blockchain technology? Again, we're thinking about an audience that's not really crypto-centric. It's not, these are not necessarily technology enthusiasts. Certainly some of these people are at these big businesses, but the majority are sort of looking for just solutions to their problems that provide a financial return, or just an easier day-to-day set of operations, et cetera. And what we're seeing is that, global trade's way up. So there's a lot more collaboration, smaller world in some ways. This creates more competition also. Companies have to move a lot faster, and that's driving greater reliance on external companies. So your average enterprise, let's say in the Fortune 500, probably has 5, 10, 20,000 vendors. There are big sectors of outsourcing that are growing really rapidly. Cloud, obviously, but things like contract manufacturing too. Companies are entrusting major operations to external parties so that they can focus on their differentiation. You don't have vertical integration anymore. And a lot of the IT systems that these enterprises depend on were designed with a very internal-centric mindset, ERPs in particular, in which the enterprise could be assumed to sort of have total information about what's going on. And it turns out that that's, of course, not the case. And there needs to be a new architecture for the way business is done kind of going forward. And this is really coming on the last 18 to 24 months. Sustainability has always been, in the public discussion, but enormous increase recently. Big change in consumer preferences. It used to be that organic was enough. Now, what does organic mean? Consumers really want to know where their food comes from, how products are manufactured, what are the operations that companies use? Are they using the right sort of labor? All that sort of thing. So there's, at the same time as a much more complex business environment, tremendous pressure on companies to be more transparent in their more complex operations. And so what this means is you've got to kind of design your IT systems to fit this, future and present, if you will. And there have been approaches to this to date. So, the left-hand side, basically, you can imagine a company with a database, an ERP, they're working with externals, and they've got some sort of direct connectivity, APIs, emailing each other. Spreadsheets is still quite common in the business world. And what you find is it doesn't really scale very well because there's no real traceability. There's not a standard data model across all the companies, et cetera. And on the right-hand side, so in industries where you have lots and lots of transactions, for instance, you find people create intermediaries to help manage those transactions. And financial services, think like the Swifts, the DTCCs of the world, who do a great job. But there becomes a certain challenge in that these parties can become sort of a restrictive bottlenecks in certain cases. So, if companies A, B, C, and D want to do something, they kind of have to either get the permission of the intermediary or find some other means of moving forward. I'm sure this is not a surprise to blockchain people, but when you're thinking about the business audience who's a little bit less familiar with blockchain, we tend to be positioning it this way. Of course, very simply, the solution of deploying blockchains kind of gives you a sort of best of both worlds, in which you have the freedom to operate of having internal systems, but standardization by default, data integrity, traceability, and it helps the enterprises operate, well, helps them manage technologically the way they're increasingly operating today. So just a little bit on how our product is structured. What we found over the years is actually that the blockchain part can be the easy part. So we kind of just devote one layer in the stack to it. Strato's our product. It's of course based on Ethereum, and part of the reason we helped to found the EEA is that at least at the time there were certain features that enterprises needed that did not exist in Ethereum itself. I would say it's still the case today. And we wanted to standardize those extensions kind of under a common roof so that the enterprises felt comfortable that they had sort of choice in vendors and all that sort of thing. So a lot of what we end up doing is deploying middleware. So the blockchain in it is a spectacular. It's a great technology, but people are not going to throw out all of the IT systems they have today, which means you have to integrate with them. And so we find that that's often the hardest part of implementing the software. And we've developed a suite of kind of off-the-shelf connectors, et cetera, to make that easier as you go. We've sort of based frameworks from a smart contract perspective that capture common data models across different applications. So, and Trace Harvest is one that I'll talk about in detail today. But we've actually started to develop specific applications aimed at particular use cases and industries. Given that we've kind of solved the lower layers, what we find is customers are really looking for a specific problem solved, and it's quite a bit easier in certain ways to work with the direct interested parties in that problem versus going purely with the platform, working with the IT organization and having them build out additionally the solution to that problem. So we still do both. We have plenty of customers that just consume our platform, but also have moved up the stack to the industry sort of application layer, we call it, in which we're solving a problem for a business end user. So just a quick spotlight on Trace Harvest, which I mentioned again, has been developed over a number of years in production with Bayer Crop Science. So big challenge is basic traceability. So agricultural products generally are not tracked from the seed kind of in genetics origination point all the way through the consumer. In part, this is because there is a commodity, I guess, mindset, if you will, but just set of business practices where, a seed is just a seed, a bushel is just a bushel. That's changing, right? So sustainably sourced products, specialty products can be more profitable for everyone along the chain, but require more transparency in operations, more tracking of what's going on to prove to the end buyer, if that's an actual consumer, a consumer packaged good firm, a retailer, what it actually is. Am I buying the thing that I think I'm buying that merits the higher price? Another interesting business practice we've learned over the years is returns in particular. So a bag of seed can be good for a number of years, and the business practice in the sector is that you pretty much have to take the returns and pay full face value. And so these companies that manufacture seed are potentially have a large liability for outstanding inventory. And they don't know, for instance, they go through distributors before they go to the growers. The growers don't necessarily notify them when planting occurs. So they don't know what the level of outstanding inventory is. More or less the same problem happens with recalls. The lack of tracking downstream in the supply chain exposes the manufacturers of food products to big risks financially. So that's another problem that Trace Harvest solves. Compliance also is a big concern, and especially as some of the products require regulatory approval in agribusiness, we've been able to greatly lower the costs and risks around compliance by, again, having much greater visibility further down in the supply chain. So I know I'm just about out of time. Here's what it looks like. Platform Strato on the right, just a quick screenshot of the application on the left, and just a sense of the ecosystem we're dealing with here. So we're starting at the seed source, so those are the seed providers on the left, and then moving through distribution, those are the dealers, to growers, on to the processing firms, CPGs, retailers, et cetera, and touching lots of tech companies along the way and other folks. So thank you very much. I know I'm like a minute over, so appreciate it.
When I come on, it's the end. No, it's tough to do this in 10 minutes. Kieran, great info. And yeah, you were able to open our eyes to a lot of different use cases within your presentation. So thank you for your presentation. And as you mentioned, thank you for your work with the EEA in our past, present, and future. So thank you, Kieran.
Thank you.
Yep. And if we can get Paul Brody of EY. Paul is gonna.
I'm here. I'm here. Can you see me?
I can see you now. Is that a fake background or is that your real background, Paul?
This is the EY Blockchain World Headquarters. It's currently located between the car charger and the recycling bins, and down the hall from the bike trainer. So
that's awesome. Awesome. All right, Paul. Well, take it away. Can't wait to hear what
you
have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. As I tell people, like, I feel like a bit of a superhero when I get invited to do these things because I'm so flattered by the company that I'm in. So I'm really honored, and I won't play too much more with the video effects. Instead, I'll go to the actual content. So let's do that. And hopefully you can all see that very nicely. I want to start with just a sentence that everybody who works with EY probably sees all the time, which is, we believe that blockchains will do for networks of enterprises what EY did and what ERP did inside the single enterprise. And if you've worked in a large enterprise for a long time, you've sat through some kind of ERP implementation meeting. And what everyone says is, we're doing this because we want everybody in our organization to be on the same page about the data, to be on the same page about the process, and to execute shared processes. Well, this is actually really, really hard to do. It's much easier said than done. And in particular, the minute you leave the enterprise boundaries, your sophistication, your shared process, your shared rules, your common data sets, they all go out the door. So how do we recreate that? And I believe the answer is blockchain. Blockchain gives us this level playing field on which different companies can participate with each other. They can have shared process, they can have shared data, they can have shared business logic, they can have transfers and payments, transaction reconciliation, it can have all of that in a single ecosystem. So that's something we believe very strongly in. Our big, one of the things that we've done at EY, and I'm very proud of, is we've done so much work around audit, around financial statement services, around giving people confidence in their ability to transact. But we're also, and we're building a really great business. I'm really proud of kind of the huge milestones that we've achieved over the last 5 years in terms of consistency and growth and performance. And I can't share those publicly yet, but last year was a huge year for us, as it was for everybody else. And I'm kind of thrilled with the results of the team. More importantly, we are hugely committed to the ecosystem. And in particular, there's lots of people who are doing cool stuff out there, who are doing amazing stuff to scale the ecosystem, to improve the maturity. The developments on layer 2 are particularly amazing. The thing that we've staked out, the area that we've staked out and focused on, is privacy. We believe one of the key things that enterprises need to have confidence in business transactions on the public blockchains is the ability to do those transactions with privacy and security. This is why we invested in and helped found the Baseline protocol. It's behind Nightfall, which is a set of tools that we have donated into the public domain that support privacy. Our latest contribution is something called Nightfall 3. It's public domain, it's open source. It's a ZK optimistic rollup that allows you to do private, secure transactions on the public Ethereum network for under 7,000 gas, which is just kind of an incredible, kind of capability. And our newest contribution is also something called Starlight, which is all about secure, private business logic encoded as a mathematical proof that's executable on-chain with privacy. And that's another thing. It's also fully public domain and open source. And we are inviting and want to work with other people to mature and expand this, because it's still very much I would say it's right now, it's an alpha and a prototype. and not a mature system that we can scale up. What I want to talk about today is a particular case study, a project that we have been doing with Microsoft over the last few years. And again, just an incredible honor for Microsoft to select EY to build software. That's an incredible honor. The team at Microsoft has been amazing, and the partnership that we've established with them is really great because it's been all about kind of shared roles and responsibilities. EY developed the blockchain system and the smart contracts. Microsoft developed a lot of the scaling technology and the hosting. And very importantly, Microsoft did something that is hugely underrated in the world of enterprise blockchains. They went first. And I can't say enough good things about companies that have the courage to go first, because I would say 9 times out of 10, when I talk to enterprise clients, they say, a lot of them say the same thing, which is, that sounds really cool. It's going to be transformational. It's amazing. Why don't you call us when one of our key competitors goes first? Well, when you have the courage to go first, that's really incredible, and can't say enough good things about that. Let me dive into this case study because it's one I'm really proud of. It's the work that we have done with Microsoft around migrating the Xbox video game ecosystem, the procurement contracts, the software licensing from traditional contracts on paper, or these days PDF file, right, into a blockchain-based smart contract system that is properly tokenized and based on smart contracts. And it is a really powerful case study. It's on a private quorum-based network. And if you know me and you know EY, you know how committed we are to public blockchains, but it's really important to remember that this contains very sensitive enterprise information, and it predates the time when I would say we could confidently put something like this on a public blockchain. So very, very proud of where this goes. And it really is a prototype for kind of massively scalable public chain solutions. But what we've built is an Azure-based ecosystem where we take data from Microsoft and we ingest it and we transmit it to other business partners in the Xbox video game ecosystem. And by doing that, we do a couple of things. Number one, we automate the onboarding of the contract. So we take these contracts, we have a Azure-based ingestion tool based on machine learning that extracts the key terms and conditions from these paper contracts. We have currently identified more than 50 key terms, right, that we can extract from these. We convert these contracts and the key terms into smart contracts. Additionally, we tokenize the product and the software licenses so that we're moving tokens. You've heard me say this before, everybody, right? Most business agreements basically boil down to, I have money, you've got stuff, and we're going to exchange my money for your stuff, software licenses or other products under the terms of a smart contract. We generate the smart contracts, we get both parties we test them, we get both parties to digitally sign them, and we stand them up and we start running them in production. And you know, as my the prior person who was speaking said very nicely, most of the hard work in this stuff isn't the smart contract. Although Microsoft's many smart contracts are fairly complex, right? Because they were all custom negotiated. And I will say this, and I say this with love in my heart, because I am married to a lawyer. Lawyers are much better at negotiating agreements than they are at understanding how to implement them. But smart contracts are complicated, but they're not the hardest part. The hardest part is thinking about how you connect to the fire hose of transactions and data that's coming out of a massive system like the Xbox video game network. We're talking about millions of transactions a day that have to be aggregated into this system, partners that have to be onboarded. I think there's more than 3,000 partners in the content ecosystem for Microsoft. There are more than 30,000 separate contracts in this ecosystem. It is enormously complex, and all of the work is around scalability, testing, maturity, dashboards, ability to audit, right? These are all kind of incredibly important, and throw on top of that the requirement to have full confidentiality is kind of immensely important. The key takeaways, though, are not in the details of the architecture, which I think are fundamentally relatively straightforward, especially at this kind of marketecture level. The key takeaways are the business value creation, right? And it's just enormous, right? We have taken with Microsoft cycle time for monthly contract reporting basically down to minutes, right? It used to take 45 days after the end of the month. Now, clients, business partners will see they will see transactional data and their share of a license or a royalty 4 or 5 minutes after the transaction is completed, right? 100% near real-time settlement and reconciliation of the transactions across the network. And we believe over time, a 40% reduction in cost. And by the way, that 40%, that's based on the fully loaded cost of the development, right? You know, all of the machine learning work that we did, all of the infrastructure creation, and frankly speaking, the hard work of getting this done together with Microsoft. I'm going to wrap up here with two final points before I hand it back to James. The first is we've created a public version of this. It's called Off-Chain Network Procurement. It's a relatively simpler version. It handles simple things like volume purchase agreements. And the goal, and this one runs on the public Ethereum mainnet, which I'm very excited about and supports multiple buyers and sellers. And then finally, you know, this is just one part of a very big investment that EY is making in blockchain-ready SaaS applications that make it API easy to plug this stuff into your enterprise and pump out traceable tokens, business transactions, financial infrastructure on both the layer 1, Ethereum, Polygon, layer 2, we're switching on Polygon for everything we do, and then in China, BSN, the Blockchain Service Network, and Fisco BCOS. So with that, I'll finish up and I'll just say thank you again. I'm genuinely honored to be invited to this. James, back to you.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just so glad that we're recording this because I'm going to watch each and every section, and I was trying to keep up with the notes, so I can't wait to watch the recording. So I'm learning just as you attendees out there as well. Paul, great information. Thank you so much. Next, we have an exciting opportunity to learn more about Ethereum community projects. Now, you may have seen a recent press release as this is actually brand new in the works, and we're so excited to bring back to the stage Dan Burnett, Executive Director of the EEA, and Guy Martin, Oasis Open, Executive Director. They're going to tell us a lot more about this exciting project.
Thanks, James.
Take it away, guys.
All right. Hey, you want to say hello, Guy? They've seen my face already for a few secs.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm Guy Martin, Executive Director of Oasis Open, and I'll let Dan kick this off because this was a partnership between the two of us, but was initiated by Dan and the EEA. So Dan, it's only right that you should go first to announce.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we made an announcement just a few weeks ago, so this is fairly recent. I'm gonna start a little bit with a little bit of the history of the EEA. When the EEA started, and actually for most of its history, the focus was on standards, and we still do standards. That's the majority of what we do. I've been doing standards for several decades in the web and internet space. And one of the things I can say about that is that traditionally, you have a number of companies, each with proprietary implementations, which you'll never see, right? You won't see their implementations. But for a variety of reasons, they decide that they need to interoperate. And that leads to a discussion about creating a standard. So they get together, they have meetings, they work on writing up a standard, they create a test suite, and then they run their implementations against that test suite, and then that provides some indication that they are conformant to the specification. And then, you know, there's some hope of interoperability there. Now, that's kind of the traditional way that standards development occurs. One of the things that we were noticing in the Ethereum space is that things are happening in a little bit of a different way, where someone would create an open source implementation first. Now, keep in mind that's one implementation, but then they would realize that they needed others, whether it was other implementations of the same thing in other languages, whether it was other independent implementations. They wanted to enable multiple implementations that all interoperated. And so that actually led to a desire to go from an open source implementation to a standard. And it's a little bit different because now you have a community that's used to an open source way of working that needs to expand that into a standard, but do it in a proper way so that you end up with a good quality standard at the end. Now, this is something that, so actually this is like my 1-year anniversary with the EEA also. I joined a year ago. And one of the things that I wanted to do was open up the EEA more than it was. And a big part of that is to find a way to accommodate more of the community-driven projects. So as many of you know, Baseline is has been one of the Ethereum Oasis Open project projects. And that really is a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. So in partnership with Oasis, we now have something new. There's a managed open project. I'll let Guy talk about that in a little bit. But now this suite, this collection of projects, including Baseline, is now under the EEA umbrella as EEA community projects. We're very, very pleased to now say that we have member projects, we have community projects, and the goal for both is to end up with good quality standards. But the way the communities interact is different, just because there's a difference between member needs and perhaps community needs. So it was very important to us that on the community side, that we did not change the governance, okay? And I'm sure Guy will have more to say on that, but it was critical that we not change the governance. So we haven't, we've left that alone, and it operates just the way it does. But now we have an ability for the world to see that we can do all of this kind of standards development. If you have something that you want to develop, it doesn't matter whether the decision about what goes into it needs to be driven by a collection of business community members, or whether it needs to be driven by a community of open source developers. Either way, come to us. We'll help you figure out where the work belongs, and we'll help it move forward, because we are here to help mature the Ethereum ecosystem. This is part of the maturation of the ecosystem. And with that, I'll shut up. We've got a very short time. I'll let Guy speak now about.
Thanks, Dan. Well, folks, as you can see from my new background here that my team just put together for something else, Oasis Open is about open standards and open source. And I've been celebrating a little more than a year. I have you beat by about 6 months, Dan, about a year and a half now at Oasis Open. And I come primarily from the open source world, where I helped build open source program offices for places like Red Hat and Samsung and Autodesk. And so I'm coming into what was traditionally a very standards body at Oasis, and bringing the open source perspective. And so I think that what Dan is talking about in terms of sort of the harmonization of open source and open standards, and Baseline being a great example of that, right? Taking their API, using that as the bones of the standard, but starting from the open source perspective, really fits with what I'm trying to do at Oasis. And so when Dan and the EEA approached us and said, hey, how do we take the Ethereum, the enterprise Ethereum ecosystem, and actually bring the open source pieces and the member driven pieces together, it was just a natural fit for us to say, hey, we already have this Ethereum Oasis Open project. Let's actually fold that in under the EEA, make the governance continue to stay the same. As a matter of fact, John Whalen, right, from your chair of the board, has said repeatedly, the governance is sacrosanct, right? It's really important that the process that we already have remains the same for a couple of reasons, not only because it has been proven to work over the years, but it also lets us take anything that comes in through this process and through this EEA community projects effort, and potentially take that to de jure bodies like ISO, ITU, and others to make them international standards if that works out to be something that the community wants to do. But I really just look at this as a way to really bring that entire, again, Ethereum enterprise community together in a way that really, I think, serves the needs of both communities. And as Dan mentioned, right, there may be times people have sort of asked, as we made this announcement, okay, well, do we become a member of Oasis? Do we become a member of EEA? And the answer is, it kind of depends really on what makes the most sense. As Dan pointed out, if you're coming in and you're going to be doing primarily member-driven standards, the EEA is probably a great place to do that. If you're coming in and you want to participate in the EEA community projects, you don't even have to be a member of Oasis. It's an open project, so you can come in and participate. If you want to sponsor that work, kind of the community-based work, and then have also a seat on the governing board for those community projects, you would come in and be an Oasis member. But I think the thing that Dan and I have talked repeatedly, and this was a 10+ month process to make sure that this worked for both organizations. I think one of the things we've repeatedly said is we will help figure out, if you come and you're not sure, do I bring it in through the EEA? Do I bring it in through this EEA community projects? We're here to help you figure out what that means, because both organizations see a lot of value in really driving this ecosystem to be more inclusive and really bringing it under one big tent.
Thank you. Yes, we're really thrilled. I can say from the EA's perspective, we're very excited to be able to work with Oasis, who has just a wonderful reputation in standards development. I know we're short on time here. We do have we will be doing a webinar on August 11th, where the two of us can talk in a lot more depth about this for, well, anyway, longer. So at this point, I think we should probably wrap up and hand things back to James. But I want to say thank you again to Oasis. Thank you very much for this partnership, and it's been great working with you guys, and now I think helping in the maturation of the Ethereum ecosystem.
Awesome, thanks, Dan. We're tremendously excited as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Guy. I was just as excited to hear this and learn more about the partnership. And absolutely, we are here for the development and growth of the Ethereum ecosystem. Whatever makes sense for you, we will gladly point you in the right direction, Oasis, EEA. So we're excited to do that. So great stuff. Thanks again, guys. Let's keep things moving here. For this next portion, I'm really excited to bring to the stage Tim Bako of the Ethereum Foundation and Pooja Ranjan of Etherworld and Ethereum Cat Herders. They're going to be talking about the Ethereum roadmap. Tim, Pooja, are you coming on live?
Thank you for the introduction, James.
No problem. How you doing, Pooja?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Awesome.
Should I go ahead and start sharing screen?
Yep, you can start doing that. I'm going to go ahead and mute my line. Do we have Tim? Is he?
Yeah. Hey, everyone.
Hey, I hear you. And now I see you. There he is. How you doing, Tim?
Pretty good. How are you?
Great. Okay. You guys take over. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Hi there. I'm Pooja Ranjan here to talk about the Ethereum roadmap, and I would be talking on improvement proposals and the process improvements. A quick recap from where we stopped last time in my last talk on EEA educational series, Improving Ethereum with EIPs. If any of you may have watched it earlier, we finished up at the big picture describing the EIP standardization and the network upgrade process. Not much have changed since then. However, minor changes in naming different phases can be found here. A few weeks ago, Tim Bako started a magician thread to continue discussion on the timeline and naming of upcoming Ethereum upgrades. If you're interested to add your suggestions or might want to follow along what's going on, and here a link is provided in the slides. With my presentation today, I'm going to talk about the changes in the EIP documentation. Ethereum Improvement Proposal, EIP, documents the proposals that are there for the improvement of Ethereum chain. It has been recently brought to our attention that sometimes it is difficult for an EIP to stay up to date with respect to changing specs. In a conversation with Eric Marks and Morris on the Peep and Nape show for EIP 1474, which is actually an interface EIP, this was brought to attention to a broader audience. And we started discussing this more. During the implementation of EIP 1559 for the London upgrade, some group came together and they started exploring options to standardize JSON RPC API specification so that it could be implemented by Ethereum tool providers. Expected changes in the standardization process. Let's talk about the core proposals first. Now that we have two chains, Ethereum 1.0 and Ethereum 2.0, which is also known as Beacon chain. So the 1.0, which is also a future execution layer chain, follows the traditional network upgrade process, the diagram shown in the earlier slide. For Ethereum 2.0, Altair chain, they are using a little different approach for this upgrade. This is their first upgrade, and they are making pull requests directly to the Ethereum 2 specifications. There is some work being put in by Consensus Quilt team to document the Ethereum specification to be maintained as Python libraries. So in future, Ethereum 1.0 can also be flexible about changing their specs, and they do not have to go through the entire EIP process. The interface proposal where we identified the gap for the first time, we at the moment to resolve the conflict, people think that it's better to divide it into two different categories. One, proposals which are directly related to JSON RPC and move them out of the EIP's GitHub repository that will be maintained on a separate repository at eth1.os specs, and rest of the interface level will still be available at eips.ethereum.org. However, for networking EIPs, not major changes are expected at this point of time. They will be following the standard core proposals, and because they are completely disassociated with the upgrade, so it's completely on the client to implement the proposal as they go. There is this another major category, I must say, is Ethereum request for comment. It's a very big one because there are almost equal number of proposals available as there is there in the core proposal section. These are the popular ERC category that many people may be aware of. I personally feel that some more documentation could be helpful to user community to understand what is ERC and how we can actually improve it. There are so many proposals which are in draft, they might want to be pushed into the final status. So I have documented here the issues, challenges, and some possible solutions that might be helpful for managing the Ethereum request for comments. On Meta EIP section, we may be seeing a big change. As of now, there are 10 proposals in final status, and out of 10, 9 are the upgrade related, which we are planning to move from the EIP's repository to Ethereum 1.os spec repository as a upgrade.md file. And EIP1 is the only living Meta EIP that people are going to find in the Meta EIP category. As per the informational, it's ironic that we do not have any proposal in final category. However, EIP 2982, Serenity Phase 0, which is in last call, so we are expecting it to move it to the final phase really soon. Proto EIP is a way of proposing proposal before it is actually putting into a pull request form. Vitalik talked about Workle tree EIP in a stateless meeting, and later on there is another Proto EIP published by Mikhail for the change of consensus mechanism. This is now merged, I think today morning itself, as EIP 3675 to the main repository. And we have recorded a very good episode for EIP 3675 in PEEP and EEP to explain what this proposal is all about. And a shameless plug for the show, we have recorded over 40 episodes of PEEP and EEP. This is all about Ethereum improvement proposals and upcoming upgrades. Give it a watch. It is available on Ethereum Cat Herders YouTube. You can go to the playlist called PEEP and EEP. I would love to leave with a big picture again. This is the representation of network upgrades, fusion network upgrades. As per my understanding, I have tried to depict it in like a right time frame for whatever information we have collected so far. Tim Baiko will be talking more on this right after this presentation. I spent a decent amount of my work time with Ethereum Cat Herders community and also run the etherworld.co website. I'm on most social media, on Twitter and Medium. Follow me at Poojaranjan19. Appreciate the opportunity to share the development on the process improvement and Ethereum blockchain. Over to you.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. My video's pinned. Yeah, so I'm going to walk through a bit of the Ethereum roadmap. Let me know if you cannot see my slides. Sorry. Okay, so you should see everything now. So I'm Tim Baiko. I run the core developer calls on Ethereum. So this is basically the calls where the different developers get together to decide what protocol changes happen on the network. And oh, sorry, I have an alarm on my phone. Yeah, if you want a copy of these slides, you can get them here. I have a bit.ly ETH-July-2021. So there's a couple links in the slides. If you want to visit those after, you're free to. Because we're a bit short on time, I'll pass over the previous upgrades and just get to the stuff that's coming in the future. So first of all, we have this upgrade called London, which is coming not in Q2 or Q3, but actually next week on August 5th. This is one of the biggest upgrades we've ever had on the current Ethereum chain, where we're introducing a complete overhaul to how transaction fees work on Ethereum. So EIP 1559, which you've probably heard about before, basically adds an in-protocol minimum price for transactions, which greatly improves how easy it is to estimate what's the right price you need to set when you're sending a transaction. So if you've ever sent a transaction on Ethereum, you've had this experience where like you send a transaction, it says it's going to confirm in 30 seconds, and then you refresh the page and now it's 2 minutes, you refresh again, it's 7 minutes. And this is due just to the dynamics of how kind of the auction model for transaction fees work on Ethereum right now. So 1559 aims to not only make it easier to figure out what's the right price, but also keep more kind of empty space in blocks on average so that we can include transactions quicker when they're submitted to the network. So this is the biggest change that's going as part of London. There's also a couple other smaller ones. EIP 3529 changes how gas refunds work at the network level. So right now, when you store data on the Ethereum network, it obviously costs you gas to do that. And there's always been this incentive in the network to clear your storage, and you would get a gas refund if you did that. So if you stored some data and then removed it, yeah, you would get a refund. But unfortunately, people have kind of abused this behavior where what they'll do now is when gas prices are quite low, they'll just fill the network up with kind of junk data so that they can then get a refund for that gas at a later date when gas prices are higher. And that creates instability on the network, not only because it kind of blows up the stake, but also because the execution from gas that's being refunded is not actually counted entirely towards the block gas limit. So right now, if you get kind of a refund on your gas during your transaction, and half of that can be applied to as more execution in that block, and that means that when we're thinking about things like raising the block gas limit and whatnot, it's very hard to reason about it because there's a lot of variance in like how big the actual blocks are, even though the gas limit is the same on all of them. So refunds kind of just increases the variance in the kind of actual amount of gas that's executed in the block. So by removing that, we kind of get just tighter bounds on the block size, and it helps in the future if we do want to raise the gas limit and whatnot. We can just reason about it a bit better. Third change that's coming into London is EIP 3554. So this pushes back the difficulty bomb. So we have this difficulty bomb in Ethereum, which is a mechanism where it makes mining on the network exponentially harder. And you can think of it as a very steep exponential curve. So for most of its life, the curve is basically flat. It doesn't actually affect mining, but then at some point the bomb goes off and then it becomes exponentially harder, quite quick to mine, up to a point where within a few months, it would just be impossible to mine on the network. The idea behind that was to facilitate the transition to proof of stake. So, to make it impossible to keep mining forever on Ethereum. So the bomb is going off this summer. We're obviously not ready to transition to proof of stake quite yet, but we will be soon. So we're kind of pushing it back to December. I think very optimistically we might have the transition then. More likely, we'll probably have to do one final pushback of the bomb in December for another few months, and that'll be the final one. And then finally, there's this other small change coming into London, which just reserves a certain starting sequence for smart contracts. So it makes it impossible to deploy contracts starting at that sequence so that we can use that in the future to identify kind of special smart contracts, which we can execute in a different way. So we're not actually implementing any of those new functionalities in London, but we're just saying, hey, we're going to reserve this starting byte sequence so that in the future we can use that as an identifier for new functionality. In parallel to all this, so this is everything that's happening on the current Ethereum proof of work chain. The proof of stake part of the system is having its first upgrade. So since its launch last December, it hasn't had a network upgrade yet, and there's not a date set yet, but in late August, early September, Altair will go live. And there's basically three main changes that are introduced. The first is adding functionality, which will enable us to build light clients for the beacon chain. So we're just going to add kind of some extra data that beacon chain validators need to report. That will make it easier to build light clients off of. The second is basically just some changes to how validator rewards and penalties are calculated. So because there's a large amount of validators on the network and they get the large amount of rewards and penalties, we don't actually calculate every single update to their balance every time there's a change. We try to batch those and optimize them. So we're improving that process there as well. And then lastly, and potentially most importantly, we're raising the penalties for inactivity and slashing. So when the beacon chain launched last December, there was a decision made to kind of lower the penalties if you do something wrong because it was still new and experimental. Now that it's been up and running since then, we're basically cranking up those penalties up to their full level. With that being said, the next big thing on the roadmap is the merge. So the merge is taking the current Ethereum proof of work chain and combining it with the proof of stake chain. So once London and Altair are out, this will be the main focus of development teams on both sides. And we've already kind of seen our focus start to shift on that as the development work on these two upgrades is starting to wind up. And to explain the merge, it's kind of worth looking at like the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap and how it's evolved over time. I think a lot of people are still familiar with like the first iteration, or I guess the most popular iteration of the Ethereum 2.0 roadmap, which was to have phase 0, 1, and 2. So at first we wanted to have kind of phase 0, which was launching the proof of stake system, which we did. So it's the beacon chain, it's up, it's running. And then the plan was to add shards to this beacon chain system, which would only store data and not run computation. And eventually, as part of phase 2, to turn on computation in those shards, where they would transition from just storing data to actually running transactions. And this transition from phase 1 to phase 2 was always kind of the most complicated and underspecified bit. So as we were working on this, we've also seen some really good progress on scaling outside of Ethereum 2.0, and this was mostly through rollups. So over the past year or two, we've seen a ton of progress on rollups as a way that we can just scale computation on Ethereum. This is when you hear about layer 2, this is basically what it means. And we've started to see those kind of work in practice. They're live on the network today. So we had this shift of, instead of trying to scale computation through sharding, we could just use the current rollups that exist and have those be our main scaling solution. And so there was this proposal to basically say, let's keep the proof of stake engine, keep a single shard with the EVM in it, which is the current Ethereum shard as we know it, and use rollups to scale that. If we want to have data shards as well, we can have those, and they're actually quite useful for rollups because rollups generate a lot of data. So if there's a way for them to store data cheaply, we can reduce the end user costs. But this kind of greatly simplified the roadmap, where instead of trying to figure out how do you turn on computation across all of these shards, you basically outsource that to rollups, which are already live and running. And then kind of the final refinement of this idea was to say, instead of having the EVM run as a shard in this whole system, why don't we flip things around and keep the current kind of Ethereum model and simply change the consensus algorithm? So go from proof of work to proof of stake, but keep as much of a current architecture as possible. And one way to think about this is, and I guess the people on this call will know this, that Ethereum clients can already handle multiple consensus algorithms, right? So if you're running your private network on Ethereum, you're usually not running it on proof of work. You're probably using something like IBFT. A lot of the testnets on Ethereum use algorithms like Clique. So there's already this concept in an Ethereum client like eea-eth or Nethermind or Besu that the consensus algorithm is swappable. So the kind of final iterations on this roadmap was saying, well, why don't we just swap, proof of work to the proof of stake algorithm that's running on the beacon chain? And that's what we're going for right now.
Thanks, Tim.
So,
I know.
Am I out of time?
Yeah, we're out of time, and I'm sorry to, I don't want to cut you off, and we'd love to.
Sorry about that.
You're fine. But but thanks for your time. Pooja, your information. I know you guys mentioned reach out for maybe some of your slides and information. And it's difficult to get all your information in a few minutes. So we know it. Again, yeah, thanks, Tim. Greatly appreciate it.
Have a good one.
You too. Take care, Tim. Now, as you've seen and heard, we've had some amazing speakers. You've heard a lot of new updates, information, and if you thought it couldn't get any better, just wait for my next introduction. Hold on tight. I'm shaking here with excitement because I have the distinct honor and sincere privilege to bring three legendary pioneers and leaders of Ethereum to the stage. Please help me to welcome Balaji Srinivasan, Joseph Lubin, and Vitalik Buterin. These three distinguished gentlemen will talk about the future of Ethereum and web. We're honored and excited to have you guys here. And please know, check your chat because you've got time. We want to hear you guys talk. Don't want to cut you off. And please don't cut yourself off either. But thanks guys for being here. Can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Hey, James, thank you. Hey, Balaji. Hey, Vitalik.
Well, that's a very kind introduction, but I think that Vitalik and Joe have done a little bit more for Ethereum than I have. I'm just, but I have, I've helped on the margins, but it's obviously all you guys. So thanks for that intro. I guess I'm going to be, the quasi moderator here, but so got a few questions by Joe, Vitalik. Can you guys both hear me? Audio good?
Yes.
Everything?
Yeah, very clear.
Great. Good. So, just starting out with like the history of Ethereum, I remember Vitalik when, most people don't know this, but you and a group that became Blockstream, another group that became Colored Coins, all came into A16Z in 2013 when me and Dixon were general partners there, right? And I remember asking, who's the founder, and everybody raised their hands at the same time. And I was like, all right, that's going to be, there's going to be some fission events here. There's going to be some splitting and rejoining, and which is what happened, some recombination. And then at the Bitcoin conference in, I think, 2014, we all had that conversation out on it was a patio or a lunch thing, and the number of co-founders had now dropped to like 7 or something like that. So it was like a smaller number, but still N. And so I was like, man, these guys are really smart. This is extremely decentralized and theoretical. Is this going to actually work? And I thought you guys were really smart, but that's my recollection of that time. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yes. So that's the Fellowship of the Ring, where, of course, it turned into 3 groups that ended up going their own way. That was definitely a fascinating and interesting time. That time was like an earlier time for crypto. So it was a very interesting time for crypto that's was, of course, destined to never repeat itself. It was still this time when the space was still small enough that, like, whether you call it crypto or whether you call it Bitcoin as a whole, was still like this one kind of tightly knit community. And 2014 really was the time when like the splits started happening, right? Like 2014 was both the time that Ethereum really properly formed into its own community, that the Bitcoin maximalist movement kind of really emerged, and I guess started talking about how how Ether was going to go to 0. It was also the time when the big block versus small block split happened. It was the time when a lot of other projects, like I think even Tendermint, for example, started around that time. So that was this moment where it really changed from just being kind of one group of people to being a lot of groups of people that were more separately kind of pursuing their different visions. And like there's downsides of that. Like I really appreciated the threads on the Bitcoin forum back when it wasn't even called Bitcoin Talk in 2011, when in politics and society, you just had anarcho-capitalists and socialists just peacefully having long form debates with each other. And alas, such things are more difficult to find now. But at the same time, you do have these kind of cohesive communities that are actually trying to do the best that they can to executing on each of their various visions. And, like multiple of them actually ended up happening. And I think what the space has accomplished since then has been really meaningful and interesting already.
Joe, what are your recollections of that period?
Yeah, so
Early days.
Thinking about it from a sort of philosophical perspective, we see these moments of revelation, received wisdom, bringing the tablets down the mountain, and there's something profound and beautiful there. And then everybody starts to bicker about what the interpretation is and what the proper evolution is. And so we're in that moment of trying to explore the solution space on this received wisdom, which is decentralized protocol technology and blockchain specifically. And it is starting to feel like, certainly the Ethereum community is very collaborative, but it's starting to feel like we're going to rapidly move towards an internet of decentralized protocols, an internet of blockchains, and we'll sort it out. So like at the network hardware level, token ring, Ethernet, that got sorted out. TCP/IP ended up winning in that particular layer. And what I look forward to is seeing a lot of these networks interoperate smoothly with one another, and that's starting to happen via bridges and other technologies, and essentially moving up the stack, creating abstractions so that we just think about tokens, not which flavor of token is sitting on what particular network. And so it'll be great to see this layer rationalize itself. Happy to see a lot of vigorous collaboration, competition, and communication.
Well, it's funny you say that. One paper I wrote internally at Coinbase, and probably should have published externally, but was about like the nouns and the verbs of crypto. So a noun is like a holder, a miner, a staker, a user, a wallet, et cetera. And the verbs, buy, sell, send, receive, were sort of in mine, were like the 5 verbs of like the first several years, right? And now, more recently, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had a profusion of new verbs like, stake, and of course, burn has become more common, and, lend and borrow and X and Y and Z, right? A variety of these verbs. And one of the things that I'm observing is more clients are doing more sophisticated things beyond just send and receive. They may need to consume multiple chains or multiple tokens for a particular functionality. They're doing more than simply just send receive, which is basically the only on-chain event for an exchange for many years. Now, they're doing all these things. That's maybe not, that's certainly been going on for at least the past couple of years, but I think that's exploding, like the crypto verbs, and it's tracking those verbs beyond just buy, sell, send, receive, where you can really kind of see the ecosystem building out. Towards that end, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, like the nouns and the verbs, or new verbs you're particularly interested in. Just like interest, borrow and lend is a huge one where you can scale that to trillions of dollars, but love your thoughts on that. Either of you.
Yeah, one thought is just that the verbs that are accessible to more people are interesting. So it's what we're doing is a paradigm shift, and it's about similar to how the internet and web technologies democratized so many things around information, publishing, access, etc. We're seeing democratization of 2 layers. One is the new trust foundation layer, where people, rather than centralized institutions, are constructing the mechanisms of trust for the planet, and that enables the construction of the decentralized finance layer. And so some of the verbs are now available to people. People weren't really allowed to use the verb mint or
Right.
perhaps destroy, burn currency. That was illegal, actually. But now we can freely send our money to the zero address or /dev/null if we want to.
Vitalik, any thoughts on that, or maybe thoughts on scaling, one or both?
Well, on scaling, I think again, right now, we've obviously been seeing just a lot of scaling work that's been happening over the last few years, and like, a lot of it even has academic roots that go decades deeper, finally turning into like real live things that you can go and use, right? Like Loopring and ZK Sync deserve a lot of praise for being the forerunners. They've been these ZK rollups successfully running on Ethereum for over a year now, and the next step is scaling that's not just for very specific applications, but that you can just run generic EVM applications on. And that's like we're seeing a lot of candidates for that, right? There's Arbitrum, there's Optimism, there's ZK Sync's EVM implementation, there's Hermes's EVM implementation, there's the stuff that Starkware is doing, and then at the same time, there's the work within the kind of Ethereum core happening on sharding to just massively increase the space of data that these rollups have to use. And so those things are all kind of happening, and I'm expecting a lot of them to just roll out over the course of the next year or so. And that's, I think, interesting because first of all, like there's clearly a kind of dire need for scaling solutions of some kind. And there's definitely also a concern that if the decentralized scaling solutions don't come in time for the demand, then at some point, like there's going to be this race to the bottom, and these more centralized scaling models are going to take over. And like if that gets kind of locked in as an equilibrium, then like that could be a risk for the space, and it will end up kind of recreating systemic intermediaries that we were trying to get rid of. But I'm very optimistic about the fully decentralized things that are being built. And I think the consequences that we're going to see and that are relevant to enterprise users, right, is that in the enterprise space, it's been historically very private chain dominant. And there were a couple of reasons for this. Like one of them is privacy, another is scalability, a third is regulatory compliance. But I think we're seeing all three of those be addressed, right? Like privacy is being addressed by things like Nightfall from EY and a bunch of other frameworks. Aztec is also another one that use zero knowledge proofs to basically get public chain level guarantees together with private chain level privacy. Actually, even better than the level of privacy that consortium chains give you, because in a consortium chain, you still need the consortium to have the data. And then regulatory compliance, like combined with privacy, that can be just implemented in like whatever kind of combination or permutation you want, using the right zero knowledge proof magic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, viewing keys. Yeah, no, the Zcash team did a lot of like good kind of pioneering thinking on that. And then scalability, like also, the rollups and the sharding are solving that, right? And so like there's this large set of applications that people have been kind of conferencing and theorizing and blabbing about for a long time, but that haven't really seen the daylight because there hasn't been a good platform for them, or the platforms that exist, either they're closed silos or they cost $7.23 a transaction. But with scaling technology, that's going to completely flip on its head, and a lot of those things are going to become viable again. So it's like this year is a great time to start just building things that even haven't really been built at scale before on blockchains.
One question on scaling. So one thing I think we've discussed, but I'm not sure, is basically that one of the things about crypto as a space is things don't work until they suddenly do. It doesn't kind of work, and then like boom, Ethereum is $30 billion, and then it doesn't work for, and then DeFi summer, just everything kind of snaps together, right? And with scaling in particular, an interesting question is, for the internet to actually scale, we actually needed to lay fiber. You couldn't just go from 28K modems to broadband without a lot of, digging overseas, like undersea cables and, all that type of stuff, right? Or the 5G build out, that's like a lot of antennas. But a fair amount of Ethereum scaling is software, and some of these scaling techniques are synergistic. So in your view, to what extent, can these all just kind of roll out lickety split? Some of them already have, like, Polygon is out there and whatnot, right? Some already have. And, they could roll out and then they could be synergistic and stack on top of each other. And so we get like kind of a vertical capacity increase. We've kind of already seen some of that with Polygon, but I'd like your thoughts on what is to come.
Yeah, and I think there's more challenges with adopting layer 2 scaling solutions than there are with adopting Uniswap, because like part of the magic of Uniswap, right, is that the user interface was just incredibly simple. Like you go to the website and you click buy, right? Like that was a huge paradigm shift, when before the mindset was, well, if you have an exchange, it has to have an order book because order books are like quote capital efficient, and you have to like go and have the ability to place market orders and buy orders and have it clutter up the screen. And Uniswap is like, well, no, screw all that. Like X times Y equals K, bro. And that like the simplicity of that like ended up like I think beating out the inefficiencies of that model. And once people caught onto it, it grew quickly with a scaling solution.
You can come with a rational argument for that, which is that your actual cost is the cost of capital plus the cost of time, and that sum of costs is actually minimized with the brokerage for many people.
Absolutely. And with things like with scaling solutions, the difference is that there's challenges around, like, first of all, even just in your wallet, like you have to do some more slightly more complex like work and like twiddling around with configurations to actually switch to another network. It's not like one click to switch between one network and another. There's challenges around moving assets between the main chain and the rollup. So like, for example, withdrawing from an optimistic rollup takes a week. And like you can fix this with these second layer markets for withdrawals in progress, but that stuff has to actually be built. There's techniques for moving between rollups more quickly, but that has to actually be built. So there's challenges around like key management. There's challenges around security. So there's this larger set of challenges, and so it's less 0 to 1 and more like layer 2 is first to get powerful enough for this set of applications, and then but they still have these weaknesses, and then the weaknesses reduce, and the weaknesses reduce more. And we are in the early stages of this already, right? Like ZK Sync, for example, it gets used by Gitcoin grants, but it's only getting used for a few things, right? Like if the Ethereum community had a more active like consumer merchant payments ecosystem, which I think it should, then I think it would have, coordinated more usage of Loopring and ZK Sync by now. But
well, what percentage? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just like, that's less of a focus of the community right now. But like at some point, it's like layer 2s are going to support enough of what people wants to do that people will take them seriously, and like the network effects will go from there. But I mean, I do think that like there is going to be some friction in the transition, which I think is okay. Like I think it's actually good, because this is fairly like security demanding technology, and it's important to kind of take it slow and try it out before we trust billions of dollars to it.
One question for you, I mean, maybe this post exists, but if it doesn't, might be a good one to make, is something where you sort of rank order, you take various scaling solutions and you're like, okay, this one is passive and requires 0 effort by the developer. This requires like 1 line of code, and this requires like significant surgery on the whole thing. And you need to think about state on multiple chains and so on. So put that on the x-axis, and then put like scaling benefit or something on the y-axis, right? Right. And there's different ways of quantifying that.
There's a post that's not, there's my post on rollups, right, which doesn't really take the DevX angle, but it does take the angle of what are the security properties and like what are the capabilities. So like, can it even support general purpose EVM applications versus is it just something for payments and a couple of other things? I think like the differences in terms of DevX,
like Guido with Python. With Python 3, for example, his change from print without the parens to print with the parens actually broke enormous amounts of code. It's the dumbest change you could imagine, but it was actually like
including my code.
Including my code, including all of our code, right? So that's why like the 0 dev effort, right, or the 1 line import at the top is potentially something to optimize for. And I guess I just don't have a good.
It's valuable, though. I think at the same time, there's also a strong case for like being willing to put your foot down and do the short-term pain for long-term gain things, especially since we're an exponential ecosystem, and the long term will have thousands of times more users than we do now.
To your point, Apology, it may feel like scaling is going to go slowly or is going slowly, but it is happening in parallel. So many different efforts are happening inside of the Ethereum ecosystem at layer 2 with Ethereum 2. And so it is likely to bloom pretty rapidly at some critical point. And it's also important to note that sufficient decentralization is acceptable for certain kinds of systems. We will be operating on an internet of blockchains, and there'll be subnets that are less massively decentralized, although I do believe massive decentralization will win in the end for the important use cases, the high value use cases. It's great that this may be controversial, that the Binance Smart Chains and others are helping the early majority to onboard themselves inexpensively. I think of them as the AOLs and the CompuServes of our era, and I think of them as either self-limiting processes or something that will end up being niche as scalability comes to fully decentralized solutions. It's also important to note that we're just figuring out the different kinds of blockchain solutions that are appropriate for different kinds of use cases. So there may be some architectures that are great for high frequency trading. And I think we'll see many of the current technological approaches figure out their niche and do well in that niche. And that's another sort of macro form of scaling.
Yeah, and like Jeff Dean has a famous post that you guys may be familiar with, where he kind of goes through like the number of nanoseconds, or for different kinds of operations, and like L2 cache is the fastest, then you have RAM, and then you have hard disk, and then the really slow is send a packet to the Netherlands and back, and just like understanding those orders of magnitude for within a computer system. And so as I've just messed around with different things and like invest in lots of projects and just kind of advising people and building our own systems, lots of them at Coinbase, I think of there being like 3 tiers: on disk, online, on chain. And just like with the early internet, a big part of the art was minimizing like actual bandwidth traffic, right? So like Netflix would just let you order the DVD by mail. It wouldn't actually stream it to you, right? Or Amazon would just let you click on a website. And that's why they did books, because it wasn't like a high bandwidth thing to sell online. It's like, just, and it was relatively easy to sell. So Google also is just a search query, put in some keywords, bring it back. It wasn't a high bandwidth thing initially, right? In the same way, today, a lot of applications are engineered around block size scarcity being an important constraint, and will be for a while. Even today, 20 years into the internet, like, or I mean, obviously more than 20, it's like 50 or whatever, depending on your count. Let's say 25 years into the consumer internet, starting in 1995, arguably with Netscape. It is possible to download a meg of JavaScript, and some mobile apps are engineered like that, but it's also possible to build apps that are kind of efficient. And so I think that these trade-offs that trade-off surface migrates with time, but I don't think the fundamentals of the trade-off go away between scaling is always valuable, and you kind of split things between different levels. So that's one thought there. I wanted to make sure we kind of hit some of these other things. Let me ask a question that's off book, okay? And, maybe I think it might be interesting. So something I have been thinking a lot more about recently, especially with, lots of things that we've all been talking about for a while, like remote and international founders and India booting up, all that stuff is now like happening in an unignorable way, thanks to COVID, like the whole, right? And something I've actually been thinking about is that international property kind of didn't really exist before crypto. And what I mean by that is, if you want to do like a Brazil, Bangladesh deal, okay, if you try to get the lawyers to do something like that, Joseph, you spend a lot of time on Wall Street. What would basically happen is they would, at best, try to find like some US corporation intermediary, which did have, if the Brazilian company wanted to acquire the Bangladesh company, like a US kind of adapter for the two, because the US had done deals in both countries, or nowadays also a Chinese adapter, because the Chinese have done deals around the world. So you essentially centralize in both of these two systems, like international property rights, like cross-border anything kind of involves either the US or China as an intermediary until crypto, right? And the reason being because these two giant scaled ecosystems had tendrils all over the world, right? There's a Chinese, set of businesses in Bangladesh and in Brazil. There's American businesses in Bangladesh and Brazil, but probably not too many between the two until crypto, right? And so this is something I've thought about a lot, that the actual unlock of this is, before you had like N sub 1 and N sub 2 and N sub 3 squared, that's say 300 million Americans trading with each other, and a few hundred million Brazilians, and 100 million Bangladeshis. And there's certainly some cross-border, especially for the Americans around the world. But now you have kind of the end-to-end matrix of everybody trading with each other. I know, you're on Wall Street for a long time, Joe. I'd love your thoughts on that. Like, the complexity of international deals means they just don't happen except for very large trades. Or shoot that down. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why what our ecosystem is doing is so profound. We don't have a global financial system. We have a set of siloed financial systems across the globe that operate via correspondent relationships and are monitored at the borders at gateways by governments which impose rules on the system. It is just profound that we're in the process of setting up a fluid, global, borderless trust foundation for the planet, and a fluid, global, borderless financial infrastructure, decentralized financial infrastructure. And as things get increasingly crazy, which I think is going to happen for a little while, and adversarial, it's going to be really important to have this non-national infrastructure where nation states and other kinds of actors can put agreements together, can stake value in those agreements, and can be held accountable either by peers or by protocols to do what the agreements require them to do. And so I'm extremely excited about this infrastructure being the foundation of like true coherent globalization. It's going to take a long time, but it's something humanity needs.
Okay, I'll ask one more question, and then maybe we'll go to the Q&A. So something I have been thinking about, Vitalik, do you think that you could have done Ethereum as an American? Like, because as a Canadian, you did the Swiss Foundation and so on, but could you have done it as an American?
Again, it would definitely have been harder. Like, it's actually, like, there's more headaches in setting up or participating in listings if you're a US citizen. Like, they're basically, a lot of these banks are actually like basically forced to discriminate against US citizens in various ways because of just like internet and extraterritorial legal issues. But this also reminds me of do you remember the story that I was actually when I started my whole Bitcoin trip, my original plan had been to do my university co-op term with Ripple, right? And
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, I called up Jed McCaleb, and he basically said yes in 5 minutes, and then we started going through the US visa bureaucracy. And it turns out that the usual channel for getting my J1 visa did not work because it required the company to have existed for 1 year, and it only existed for 9 months. And so we tried fumbling around through the system for a couple of months, and eventually we gave up. And so, the moral of the story basically is that, if the visa stuff had been simpler, then, I would have been working for Ripple now instead of doing it. And
XRP the standard.
Exactly. So, Brian Kaplan is wrong. Immigration restrictions can do some good after all.
Oh, okay. That's hilarious.
My guess is Ripple would have been working for you at this point. Rather than on its own tangent.
Very funny. All right. I guess the EEA says we're moving to the member-only Q&A. I think that's, is that right?
Yeah,
James?
I think I'm gonna do a little wrap up here, but I feel bad interrupting you guys because I could just sit here and listen to you speak all afternoon, and I'm sure our attendees as well. So yeah, so let me, so again, thanks Balaji, Joseph, and Vitalik. Greatly appreciate you being here. Let me just do kind of a little wrap up here and I'll hand it off. But today, absolutely amazing event. All our speakers, we want to thank our speakers. We appreciate you sharing your time. And most importantly, your Ethereum knowledge and expertise. It means so much to all of us who are helping to build out the Ethereum ecosystem. Your contributions are definitely helping to shape the future of Ethereum by spurring our creativity, energizing us all from entrepreneurs to startups to established business. I'm confident that new discoveries, new use cases, and new business models will be born out of this event here today. So we do want to shoot out that extra special thank you to Vitalik Buterin and all the Ethereum Foundation. We couldn't imagine celebrating 6 years of Ethereum without your involvement and support. So thank you all. We're honored and grateful for your presence here and also for your leadership within the Ethereum community. I would also like to thank the EEA staff. Won't mention everybody, but all the behind the scenes people. I do want to mention Margot. She's kept me in line and in check with my travel arrangements. Definitely have to give a shout out to Ken Fromm, who led the charge for the EEA and set up all our amazing guests. So thank you very much, Ken. Would like to thank Ken Smith of Aegon and Monica Lugo of Prodenza for hosting me here in Mexico City. I love being down here. So thanks, Ken. Thanks, Monica. And a final thank you and a big thank you to our leader, EEA Executive Director, Dan Burnett. As he mentioned, it's his 1 year anniversary here with the EEA. He's provided great leadership and vision in making the EEA the place to be for all things Ethereum. And with that said, just a couple comments about the EEA. Today's event was a public event, and we put on many events that are public, but we also have a lot of events and activities that are member only. And Balaji just mentioned that. So briefly, the EEA is a member-driven organization. We exist to help drive the Ethereum ecosystem. We exist because of your ideas, your creativity, your challenges, and ultimately your needs with Ethereum. We're here to support those and your involvement. If you'd like to learn more about the EEA, we can help support your needs. I would be your guy as the membership director and growth specialist. I'd love to talk with you, learn more about your business and how we can help your mission. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and network with you there. And also check out our website for a deeper dive into all the initiatives that we are helping to support the Ethereum business development community. I think you'll be surprised at the amount of resources and opportunities that the EEA offers. And finally, yes, this is actually a finally, EEA does, membership has its benefits, and we are going to have a private member-only Q&A session. It's going to start in about 5 minutes. If you were like me, I couldn't even step away to go to the bathroom. So our panelists have their links. Members, if you have your link, if you don't, there was an email that was sent out about 24 hours ago. So if you're an EEA member, this is a privilege that you can join into this separate session. It's going to be led by John Whelan, who was mentioned earlier. John is the EEA chairman of the board, and he's also managing director of digital assets at Banco Santander. So for EEA members, let's get ready to shift over there. If you're not an EEA member, we just want to give another huge thanks for being here. We appreciate your support. This will end your portion of the event. Again, reach out to us. We'd love to speak with you and learn more about your business. So again, thanks for all 2 to 5 minutes. Attendees, panelists, let's get over to that other link. Thanks again. Take care, and we'll see everybody soon.